Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss prospects of a general election for this October, but more specifically whether Boris Johnson himself, as mad as it may seem, may actually trigger it. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So let's just recap the epic battle that Parliament is preparing for as we march through summer. Boris Johnson has said that he intends to take us out of the EU on October 31st, come what may. He's not interested in the slightest in what Parliament has to say on the matter. So Parliament has a delicate situation awaiting it that is completely outside of the bounds of experience. There is no real precedent for what is going on here. The initial fears were for Boris Johnson to prorogue Parliament, which MPs have taken some action to avoid and are likely to take further action just to be sure after summer. But there is a greater danger in that they could vote decisively against a no-deal exit and insist on another extension. So then they dispatch Boris Johnson to the EU Council to ask for that extension, just like they used to do with Theresa May, and he will just be rude about the French and we won't get one. And there's no time for resting on laurels and seeing what Boris Johnson is going to do. With the way he's packed out the most important cabinet positions with certified lunatics, it's quite clear that a reckless disregard for everything warning against no-deal consequences is on the cards. As a result, on the day that Boris Johnson was confirmed Prime Minister, Philip Hammond, the former Chancellor, quit his post and met with Sir Keir Starmer, who is the Labour Shadow Brexit Secretary. This elevates the tension beyond mere threats of a vote of no confidence in Boris Johnson's government. Hammond and Sir Keir are to meet throughout the summer, along with other vocal opponents of no deal, in order to ensure that they have their battle plans ready for September. And Boris Johnson knows that his government are going to be defeated. It only takes a few Tory rebels to sink in, and there are many more than just a few. Johnson has not been able to fill all of his government positions because there are too few Tory MPs who are willing to serve in his government. There is only one reason for doing this, because they want to be free to oppose him when it becomes necessary. And it will become necessary. And it's not just MPs opposed to no deal that have refused to accept ministerial roles. There are also hardline Brexiteers who have refused as well. Just in case Johnson goes soft on his promises, there's basically a Mexican standoff going on in the Conservative Party between Johnson's government, anti-no deal elements and pro-no deal elements. The scenario is predictable enough. I can see no way for Johnson to bounce Parliament when they know exactly what he's up to. So if Boris Johnson persists with exiting the EU in October, then those opposed to a no deal will offer their support to Jeremy Corbyn, who will issue a vote of no confidence in Johnson's government, and Johnson will lose that. Now, if Johnson does go soft on the no deal option, which is very unlikely given his cabinet of cacophonous cartoonish cretins, do like a bit of alliteration, then the hardline Brexiteers will offer their support to Corbyn instead. The opposition won't care where the support comes from within the Tory ranks, they just want to defeat this government by fair means or foul. Now, faced with the situation where Boris Johnson knows there's going to be a general election anyway, he might just support it himself. He doesn't have the authority to simply trigger one as Prime Ministers in the past used to, but he can put forward the motion in Parliament and it will be eagerly supported by the necessary 2/3 of the House of Commons to go through. It would save the embarrassment of being defeated in a vote of no confidence and also allow him to enter what would be a very short general election campaign with the confidence of a leader who wanted it, as opposed to one who was forced into it. And there are many who feel that the Conservatives can't win a general election if we're still in the EU. But that's not necessarily true. In fact, a general election before we leave has certain benefits to Boris Johnson. The first of which is that the general election will have come about because Parliament is blocking his attempts to take us out of the EU. This is the narrative that Johnson will push in order to rally the Brexit supporting vote around him. Secondly, after leaving the EU, especially without a deal, it will become very obvious just what a disastrous move it was very quickly. This means that winning a general election a few months after leaving would be nigh on impossible. Much better to go for one before the consequences are undeniable. And it's not just a hypothetical situation. The second Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, the Conservatives have been on Facebook using messages to test the waters and find out what people are likely to respond positively to. Not to shape policy, of course, but just to work out which lies and false promises are going to work best in a campaign. Most of the adverts so far are saying that we need to leave so that we can invest in the NHS, schools, housing, the police. Obviously, leaving knackers any chance of investing in any of those. Even assuming a Conservative Prime Minister would ever want to. it seems likely that once they've determined which messages do well, they'll be ready for a much larger campaign for autumn. And for the estimation of success for the Conservatives in a general election, they have been buoyed by Labour's poor performance. Under normal circumstances, a Labour Party in opposition for 9 years, in the middle of a worsening economic crisis, and with the Conservative Party at war with themselves, would have seen sweeping gains made in the local and European elections a couple of months ago and would be leading the polls quite significantly. Under those conditions, Johnson would be utterly sunk. There's already nothing he can do to avoid a general election, and with a rampant Labour Party, there'd be nothing he could do to avoid a humiliating defeat at the polls either. But it's not completely hopeless for opponents of this worst of all forms of Conservative government. Although the party may be leading in the polls at the moment, there are, I would say, 3 possible silver linings. The first of one is that the Brexit Party are still there and still splitting the Conservative vote. Hopefully we're going to see some evidence of that this Thursday. Now, I wouldn't pay too much attention to their position in the polls either, the Brexit Party that is, because they've been quiet lately. Ahead of a general election, they may once again go into overdrive on their illegal campaigning activities on social media and surge ahead again. A robust challenge to the right-wing vote could see safe Tory seats, including Boris Johnson's himself, falling like leaves this autumn. Secondly, there are an awful lot of Conservative MPs, or who would be Conservative candidates in a general election, who will have brought this about with their opposition to a no-deal Brexit. Now, the Brexit vote there is unlikely to swing behind the Conservatives if in that constituency you have someone who is seen as a Europhile. And thirdly, Labour has not yet shored up its position on Brexit, should it gain power. We know what the Labour's position is this Parliament, but we don't know what its position is after a general election. It's taken far too long to make up its mind, but if they get it right and campaign hard on that platform, then it may be possible to reverse the party's current fortunes. There are a few big ifs there, of course, but there has to be that hope, along with an effective anti-Johnson alliance in Parliament this summer, of course, which is going to be sitting again in, about 4 weeks' time, just over. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click on the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.